From our classrooms to our community, Hawk Talk brings you the conversations, updates, and stories that matter most across the Hillsboro R-3 School District. Hawk Talk is sponsored by Schneider Electric. The podcast starts now.
Welcome to the first edition of Hawk Talk. It is the official podcast of the Hillsboro R-3 School District. I'm Patrick Quinn, Communications Director for Hillsboro R-3, and I'm sitting with Superintendent Dr. Jon Isaacson.
Thank you, sir. Thanks you for the intro, and welcome to Hawk Talk. This is our district podcast, the first one ever, and the beginning of a kind of a new series of communication, a different format that we've never done before. As a district, we have the Nest and social media, but we really wanted to add this to our repertoire of sharing information.
Yeah, so you'll be able to stay connected with everything that's happening in our district. You'll find it on pretty much every platform where you can download podcasts, or on YouTube, or even on our social media channels. So that's really good. So before we get into everything, we want to make sure that, we're going to highlight people that are behind the scenes. That we have teachers, we have the students, we have our athletes, we have a lot of staff that we can highlight through these podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things I'm most excited about is to be able to bring students in and involve them throughout this process, even with you working potentially with some students who are interested in communications. And so I think it'll be something that's very beneficial to not only our school district, but also to the community as well.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Isaacson, you and many others, you've been working for months and years trying to prepare for changes and improvements with the district. But with changes and improvements comes big decisions about spending, right? So when I say that, what that means is running a multi-million-dollar budget each year and trying to make sure the train stays on the track with constant budget changes on the federal and state level, like that can be challenging. So let's keep in mind the school district budget, it's in great status. We do know that. Maybe not everybody who's listening or watching knows, but tell us about the budget health, the revenue versus debt, so we can have a better idea about how financially stable we are in Hillsboro. And what are you most proud of financially?
Wow, that's jumping right into it.
I want to get right to it.
Yeah. We are in that time of the year where we are working on the budget. And as you stated, currently our district is very strong financially. And that's been kind of a process really going back many years. It's not an overnight type item. And so really going back to even like 2019, pre-pandemic, is where we really started focusing on paying down our debt. And that, in a sense, was somewhat by chance when we had our Prop C item and we had went to the voters and that was approved in that April. But that year, we put over $1 million towards our debt and really started working to pay that off in earnest. And so in doing that, we have now this fiscal year, we're about 6-7 years from that point, we've paid off almost $27.7 million in debt. This year we will make the final payments on that debt, and that general obligation bond debt will be retired. And then because we've been doing that, and we'll talk about this probably later on, is the tax rate for our local taxpayers has been coming down in conjunction with that, because it works a little bit different than what it would on your home. When you pay off your home, you don't necessarily continue that. You're getting the income, is you actually reduce the taxes there. So very proud of that. As far as our revenues, is we've done a lot of different things in regards to grant writing, using our investments and interest rates to our advantage. Is over the last 2 years we've made $1 million in investment earnings on now when schools invest, they're not investing in Robinhood or anything like that. We're
Right.
investing with our CDs and treasuries, but it's using that to the district's advantage. So very proud of that, which has then resulted in a strong, healthy reserve that we have currently. But I say a but, as we're planning out doing the budget process, there's some things going on from the state, nationally, and obviously with our economy that has some concerns ongoing when we talk about planning for the future, because it's not just a yearly budget. Decisions made today will be
5, 10, 15 years down the road, right?
correct. And so I take that very seriously in regards to my role. Is obviously I'm retiring at the end of this year. Is this upcoming year? Is I want to be sure that I've laid out a plan and a budget that serves our kids and our community and future leaders of the district and boards of the district to ensure that we have a plan.
Well, at an earlier school board meeting, you laid out a plan that we had several decisions to make about safety in our buildings, the upgrades to facilities, hiring armed safety officers. We've never had that before, and that will be something that will happen this school year. But you used an analogy about renting versus owning, and it really stuck out. You asked people at the meeting if they wanted to be renters or owners. I found that to be very interesting. Can you expand on that analogy? Because I found it as you saying the people of Hillsboro should be in control of how their money is spent, on educating students, paying teachers, and building upgrades, rather than relying constantly on federal funding and state funding. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah. Well, and it's layered with that analogy. It's both, I guess you could take it several different ways of meaning, and I can apply it in a lot of different ways. It's really about decision making. And one of the things that as a district, and we've been, I'm not going to use the word over-reliant, but candidly, and I've said this in previous meetings, is our state funds that we were receiving from the state were actually higher than what local taxpayers were paying in. And so when you're over-reliant on the state, which is great when somebody else is paying a majority of, aren't they hey, if you're paying a majority of my bills, that's great.
But do those come with stipulations?
But
you have
they
to
do.
spend-
If I want that to continue, when there's different decisions to be made, then I'm reliant on you to say, yeah, John, you can spend the money that way, and or the amount of money that you'll have. And so we become over-reliant. If somebody else is paying a majority of the bills, and I've said this, if you don't own the company fully, you're limited on, there can be limitations when decisions come. And so I want our community, because we have and they do, our board and our community we should be making these decisions. And we are, but if we become too reliant on someone else, that includes money, to pay our bills, that could create some challenges in the future. And so when it comes to, what I mean by that is, if we want to do something for our students, but we can't make that decision because we don't have the funds because the state has cut it, is then our kids don't have something that maybe another community may have because their citizens say, hey, we want to pay for that. And that's not the same challenge there.
So that, when you bring that up, it just makes me think of a couple months ago where we had parents come to the school board and they were worried about safety at every building. And they were also worried about a baseball field and how they wanted to have the baseball field at the high school be on par with other school districts around Jefferson County. So is that what you're getting at here too?
Yeah, I mean, that directly aligns to that, because I had actually met with some parents prior to that, and they had asked those questions. Why can't we have that? And looking at our budget, you could be like, hey, we're going to do this. But the simple answer, and it truly is simple, is we don't pay for it. Hillsboro residents, currently we have the lowest tax rate in Jefferson County, and we're going to lower the tax rate again as we pay off a debt service to approximately $3.44, which is going to be one of the lowest, if not the lowest, in the entire St. Louis region. Is with that, and I showed some illustrations to those parents that if they lived in a different district, their house was in a different district, the amount of taxes more that they would be, and it's significant. I mean,
Yeah,
over
it is. I mean,
thousands of
perspective.
dollars. And so
Yeah.
it's not. I don't want to pay more taxes. You know, I
Yeah,
live in
no
our
one does.
district, but when it comes to those answers as to why can't I, it really comes down to being as simple as that. And it's a lot of times when I visit with people, they're like, well, why can't you cut this and you can't cut this? Is one of the things I'm most proud of, going back to that one, is we have already been very fiscally conservative throughout that 6 years to reduce staff as our enrollments went down, to reduce administrators, to reduce, and we started at central office. We've cut our payroll at central office in half since like 2015. I was looking at that yesterday with the gentleman in my office. We started at central office going back to 2016 when I became superintendent, then replaced myself in my HR role and going down. So we have done those lean type items, and I'm sure there's little nuances that we could get even leaner, but when you're talking about the amount of money that it would take to do some of a safety upgrade at the high school, that truly does come down. That amount of money is coming down to what do we want as a community, and it does impact the tax rate. When, especially for us as a community, when there was reduced state funding forthcoming this past school year, and for the upcoming school year of approximately $800,000, we're estimating just on the state side.
Yeah.
So that's where I asked a question about renting and owning, because people, when we do want nice things, and our kids deserve that, but that's the black and white answer to how do we achieve those. And we're still trying to be creative. We've written grants. Mr. Rienauer has written several grants for us to have the CTE kitchen and the greenhouse at the farm. But to some of those items, they don't necessarily provide grants for that. Now, like the safety and security could be a FEMA grant, but then you're relying on when the federal government, again, we can have a new safe and secure entrance or a FEMA shelter for our residents. That'd be great. But instead of having one now, we're like, we'll have that whenever the federal government says that we can have that.
So you can't just expect willy-nilly.
Correct.
You have to ask and then maybe receive.
Yeah. And so it's just factoring all that in and working with the community to, at the end of the day, be like, all right, what kind of a school district do we want? What kind of a community do we want? Do we want to maintain? And then what are we willing and able? What do we want to afford?
Well, we're only halfway through the podcast, maybe not even halfway, but I do have this question. If a parent only remembers one thing as they listen, they scroll, they go through, and they listen to our conversation, what do you want them to know about how Hillsboro R-3 manages taxpayer dollars?
Cautiously. Take great pride in that, of really trying to be aware of the dollars that we have are precious, not just in tough times like right now when gas is $5 a gallon or whatever, but every day is how can we maximize each of the dollars that the community entrusts us with, and that's truly what it is. It's entrusting. It's here. I have to write this check in December for personal property tax or my real estate tax. Sometimes that great sacrifice, is that the Hillsboro district is trying to maximize each dollar, is trying to ensure that their child has the best opportunities and unique opportunities that even a lot of districts don't have with the amount of kids that we have in our career and technical education, and adapting to a changing student focus, but really being very cognizant that it's trust that people put in front of us with their dollars, and to maximize each penny we can get, and using that. That's where investing it, generating $1 million off that, using the investment to then, the board hired Mr. Reednauer to write grants, and $700,000 there of not using taxpayer dollars, and like where the sponsorships paid for the scoreboards, where the taxpayer dollars weren't having to be used ultimately on the scoreboard, because that was paid for by Jefferson College putting $10,000 a year, and Roberts Wooten Zimmer, and all of those. When I started naming them, I probably need to name them all, like a NASCAR event.
Like
all of our
NASCAR,
sponsors. I promise I'll have to bring up all of our sponsors at some point.
But that's how it pays for nice things, right?
That's how it pays.
You
for
didn't
nice
put
things.
that on taxpayers. You went and talked to sponsors to get that nice scoreboard we have.
And that's kind of taking a page out of like Mizzou's playbook, or I'd say the Rams. We don't talk about the Rams.
We don't
anymore.
talk about
the
them,
Chiefs. There are some marketing opportunities in a school, and even when you think about high school kids, we have 1,000 kids at the high school, and so there's who spend a lot of money at different restaurants and gas stations,
Yes.
As high schoolers would. So there's some marketing opportunities and capitalizing on that, but also capitalizing, meaning positively on to the different vendors of our community, Jefferson College, et cetera.
Well, now naming rights is coming into things around the country. I saw a high school in Illinois is looking for a sponsor for their basketball court. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I'm candidly, I don't know if I'm ready to start naming our courts under corporate names, Crypto.com, Hillsboro Court, and stuff. But yeah, there's that fine line of what do we want to do as a community and such as that. So I would think if we're going to name some courts, we have some especially courts. We've had some outstanding basketball coaches over the years. I think we had a gym named after one of them too, so.
I think we do. So that brings me into my next question. So what does being a good steward of public funds actually look like on a day-to-day basis? Everybody thinks they know what it's like to be a superintendent, right?
What it looks like is being accountable, being transparent, putting the information out, and explaining it in detail. And sometimes, and obviously already through this podcast, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, you're talking too much, because I can talk on that stuff and I'm passionate about it, is how do I bring school finance, which sometimes is this big, we're talking about, we have over a $40 million budget, is how do you bring that down to layman's terms so that it makes sense? And because if I don't do that, in the absence of it making sense, is where distrust can creep in, because you don't know. The other thing is just trust is the biggest issue. It's our number one goal with the board and myself with the district, is having that trust that I talked about before, that we're managing the funds, that there's not scandal related to that there's always going to be the perception of, hey, why did you spend money on that versus this? And a lot of times, even with parents, that comes up with athletics or bands. And even when I visited with some of those parents, the perception was that the district had been putting lots of money into the football program and the football field. And the reality of that was the district had not put any significant tax revenue funds into athletic facilities since 2005, 20 years ago. And then when they built that stadium is in 2018, when the new turf was put in, that was put in because we had a tornado So it's paid for by insurance. We had to pay under $100,000 in the copay or the
Kind of
deductible. The deductible. The scoreboard, as we mentioned, was through sponsors, but perceptions, our people's reality on that is we really haven't made those investments, and because there's always there's all these priorities, and it's trying to manage that. And one of the things I'm sure we'll talk about in different episodes, or even maybe this episode, is the HVAC on the roof this summer isn't. People don't get excited about HVAC.
No, but you need it.
They expect it to be there.
Right.
But it's not something new and shiny that people can see, or kids, they get excited about a new baseball field or a new facility or a weight room or a new fine arts center. And parents do too. Those are important. You got to have those things, but you also have to be maintaining.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the HVAC system. I mean, we had to replace over 80 units, right? For both heating and cooling, right? We did some of that over Christmas break, and now we're doing a brunt of it over summer break. So the people who come into the school will feel the difference.
Hopefully, but the thing was, our HVAC team and our maintenance team had, we had air conditioning in the spring.
Yeah.
The issue was, and that becomes a taxpayer item there too, is it's kind of like having an old car. When you can put an alternator on a car, you can put, replace the spark plugs and maintain it. It's when the transmission starts going out, when the engine starts going out, is when the average annual costs start going up to hey, we probably need to buy a new car. Is when you look at that from a high school perspective, that's what's happened. Is when they built that in 2001, they put 80 to 90 new cars up on the roof.
Yeah.
And so you got to replace them all at the same time. It wasn't like they put 5 up there, and then the next year they put air conditioning in the library. And so I've been asked that question. Well, why did you wait so long? Because it really wasn't broke, similar to your own home air conditioning. If it's running today, but it's 8 years old, you're probably not going to go rip it off.
No.
So that you don't have an HVAC go out 2 years from now. And so that's the challenge on those is everything has a life cycle, and especially when you're dealing with schools and kids and mass populations of people using facilities, there's a natural wear and tear that you have to keep up with.
And the next part I'm thinking about is debt reduction and taxpayer impact.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much where we're going. So the district made significant progress reducing debt over the past several years. So how did we get there? And how much is that debt taken? How much of that is taken away?
As far as?
Just how much have we paid off that debt?
What we've paid off is our general obligation bond debt. What that was is there was bond 2016, 17. The money that was taken out to do the secure entrance at the elementary, junior high, the primary, when they did the new office and the safety and secure entrances there, as well as the SPED center at the elementary. And then I believe there was portions of the intermediate from 2011 when they combined those buildings, and then paying off the Highway A property, which was out on Highway. So all of that was right at that 27.7 million. That's what's now being paid off. One of the things that led to that was in 2021, we actually did take a tax levy to take on one of the no tax increase bond levies in 2021-22, and it failed.
Not by a whole lot, right?
No, but 7 votes. But candidly, that would have generated the funds to fix some items, but our community spoke on that, and our board and myself, all right, we're not just going to put it back on. We'll go to, we're going to pay off the debt, and then we'll reevaluate it when that's paid off. Because as we paid off the debt, it's different than your home. So like if you
Right.
pay off your house, a lot of people think that's one of the things from a school finance. People think of,
Can't just have a party.
well,
Right.
no, or when people choose, well, why didn't you build this versus, or why didn't you do this with the money instead of paying off the debt? Why did you choose to pay off that debt? Is the money in our debt service on those bonds, is the taxpayers approved the district taking out the debt and the bonds to build the high school or build the elementary in the case that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So as we pay off the debt, if you're at your home and you pay off your house, presumably you're still going to have a job, you're still going to have retirement income, and so you're going to have like, oh wow, my house payment was $1,000. I now have $1,000 I can spend on something else. Well, school finance doesn't work that way. When you pay off the general obligation bond,
Which is
that
about
voters
95%, right?
paid off 95%, is I can't. We don't come. When I say the district cannot continue to charge taxes
Right.
on something that was already paid off. So that's why, as we paid off, we keep reducing the tax rate. And a lot of times, that's where like the no tax increase bond issues, we've had opportunities to run those where the tax rate would have stayed the same. Is collectively as a district, we're said, no, we're not going to run that. Is we're going to pay off the debt at that time. And when the need arises, not that we couldn't have maintained those things, but our focus was, all right, we'll let the levy go down, and at some point we'll reevaluate and then ask specifically what we need and those type of things.
So why did you make the large bond repayment? I mean, what was led to make that decision?
One with, when I talked about the kind of a culminating group of events is those post-COVID when interest rates went up. The money that we had in our debt service account that we then pay the bill for, actually we were using interest to our advantage, and interest was paying off big slices of that debt. And by paying it off early, we saved between $2 and $3 million of taxpayer dollars by paying it off early. So that was a focus.
Repeat that. How much did you save?
Between $2 and $3 million.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It adds up. It adds up over time.
That is on a tax rate from perspective. Each dime on a tax rate is about $355,000 currently. So when you think about that, that's almost that's where so far our tax rate is down $1.27. I believe at the end of this year, or when we set our tax rate, because we're going down another significant amount, 23 cents. We're going to $3.44 from $3.67. Our tax rate will be lower than it was in 1993.
93. So that
1990.
was when the Great Flood happened. That's when we had all the snowstorms.
That's when I was a high school senior. So that was a long time ago.
Yeah, you were a high school senior then,
And
yeah.
so, but that's where we've really tried to be fiscal conservatives on that and embody that. Now, have we taken on some other debt? Like when we bought the farm, that was approximately $500,000. And even as we manage that debt, that interest rate, we have some interest rates at 1.9, 2.5% is that we're paying out of our operating funds. And that's kind of the model that as a school district we need to shift to, is we're cash first and using our cash and those investments to then have that working for us. Similar like you would at home, is we have the ability to pay off, we could pay off the farm right now. We have 2 years to pay on it, but we're making more on interest on that money than sending it to pay off that at the point. So, and if that would ever change, I actually wrote that in this year's budget book, is we monitor that on a year over year, is if all of a sudden interest rates are the district investments in CD, if it went to 1%, then it's fiduciary, we need to pay off that loan because it's 1.9. And so that's how we kind of attack those with our debt and such. And so going back to your original question is the why is we strategically knew that it'd be good for taxpayers, lowering the tax rate, embodying kind of that approach.
So then one more question here. Why wouldn't you spend that money elsewhere?
Because we can't. So
tell me why, though. I mean, like people at home don't understand that.
So debt service, school finance has essentially 4 buckets.
Oh, okay.
And for a full explanation of this, I really do encourage you to look at our district budget, which will be on our website. And it'll be right on the front, district finances. But 4 buckets. We have operating funds. And so in the operating, that's basically all the bills. Pays for the gas, pays for the daily operations, supplies, classified salaries. Then there's the teacher fund. The teacher fund pays for teacher salaries. Mm-hmm. And the funds between 1 and 2 can kind of all go in that same fund. Fund 3, which is a debt service, can only be used to pay off debt. And it's got its own levy so that if you don't have any debt, like we won't have any bond debt, that's going to be 0. So Fantastic. It used to be at 60 cents, 70 cents, 94 cents. This year, this upcoming in September when we set it, it's going to be at 8 cents. Next year, it'll be at 0 cents. And so that's why the tax rate will go down another 8 cents.
And we're paying on 1993 prices.
Correct. And so then Fund 4, which is capital, and we're able to move money from operating, Fund 1, to capital. But once the district puts it there, it cannot come out.
There you go.
So it's like if you're going to send money away for a new deck at your house or a new roof, once you put that $1,000 in there, you can't say, oh, we really got to go on vacation, or we really want to spend money on this pet project. Let's pull that $1,000 out for the roof. You can't. By law, you can't. So Fund 3 and Fund 4, capital and debt service, are restricted, meaning by law, once it's there, you cannot remove it from there.
Okay.
And so that's the why, is why didn't we spend the money on the debt service somewhere else? Because we could not. And when you talk about taxpayer trust, again, that
comes full circle.
Would violate that and would be against the law. So
yeah. So there's your answer. So that's going to wrap the first podcast. We're going to go into the second podcast talking about budget priorities. I wanted to get that out of there. Also state funding and legislative changes, because those things are constantly happening in Missouri, especially over the past 12 to 14, 15 years especially. So we'll get into that in podcast 2. So for Dr. Isaacson, I'm Patrick Quinn. That is your first edition of Hawk Talk.